Welcome to EoZTV. I'm Elder of Zion, and today we're going to be talking about women's rights under Palestinian rule. There's an extraordinarily strange thing that happens out there in which feminists, the real card-carrying, placard-carrying feminists, the type of people that go to the Women's March, say that Palestine is a feminist issue, which it is, but not quite in the way that they mean. They say that, over here is a typical quote here from Mariam Barghouti, fundamentally speaking, feminism cannot support racism, supremacy, and oppressive domination in any form. That may be true, but the question is, can feminism support misogyny in any form? Because pretty much when they're supporting Palestinians, they are supporting misogyny. But of course, it's not that they're supporting Palestinians. They hate Israelis and they hate Zionism. Here's Linda Sarsour very famously said when she was still in charge, or one of the people in charge of the Women's March, she said that Zionism and feminism don't go together, that it's literally impossible to be a Zionist and a feminist. But the real question that nobody's asking, or very few people are asking, is it possible to be a pro-Palestinian activist and a feminist at the same time? And it's not only them. There's the plenty of feminists that are out there. Here's again a picture of a logo of one of these things. There is the National Women's Studies Association a few years ago passed the BDS resolution. It was really it's sort of amazing. But okay, what's going on? So today, or actually last night, I found something very interesting. It was a UN report from the UN. This is not, this is not an Israeli, not a Zionist report. This is a UN report that summarized, and it didn't talk about what's actually happening in the territories. It just talked about the laws. It objectively looked at all of the laws that are under Palestinian law, both from the Palestinian Authority as well as Hamas, and they looked at what those laws mean for women. And they did it for all the Arab countries, as a matter of fact. It wasn't only a Palestinian thing. But it was very interesting. And here we have a summary of all of it. Anything with red is bad. Anything with orange is half bad. So, and we're going to go through this because I've never seen in one place such a great summary of what the Palestinian laws about women are. Both criminal and personal laws. So let's just go through it quickly because it's sort of amazing when you see it all in one place. And every single one that you read about, you wonder, how can feminists possibly support this? So domestic violence. Palestine has, again, this is both Gaza and the West Bank. Palestine has no domestic violence legislation whatsoever. Nothing against that. Now, okay, obviously, if a man kills his wife, he might be violating other laws, but there's nothing specific for domestic violence. Marital rape, not criminalized at all. Do it all you want. Rape, they do say that rape is not allowed. Fine. If you are raped, if a woman is raped under Palestinian law, both, again, the Jordan Penal Code, which generally covers the West Bank, and the Criminal Code of 1936, which covers Gaza, abortion is prohibited, period. The biggest issue for women, for feminists, of abortion, and how many people actually learned or knew ahead of time that the Palestinians explicitly make it forbidden to have an abortion under their law. It's like nobody even knows this and nobody talks about it. Just imagine if Israel had a law like that. People would go nuts. Sexual harassment, not criminalized by the labor code, although in certain cases, unwanted sexual conduct, may be considered not good. Honor crimes. Finally, after a number of years, the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, finally repealed the laws that would mitigate the penalties for honor crimes. An honor crime, of course, is when somebody kills a woman because he feels that she is dishonoring him or dishonoring the family. But in the Hamas, has not applied any reforms. Right now, if you kill a random person on the street in Gaza, you get a higher penalty. You get prison time, more prison time than you do if you kill your wife or your sister, as long as you say, hey, she was a slut, because that's an honor crime. Adultery. It's an offense in both Gaza and the West Bank. It's a criminal offense. And again, the women are the ones that usually get the short end of the stick if something like that happens. Luckily, there is no female genital mutilation in Gaza or the West Bank that anybody knows of. So there's no legal prohibition. But for many years, I have not heard about anything like that happening. No anti-human trafficking legislation, which is, of course, disproportionately affects women. There's no, prostitution is prohibited, which, again, you're not going to make a big deal over that because it's prohibited in most places in the West as well. Although, again, this is a feminist desire that, the prostitution should be protected. And sexual orientation. Over here it says that in the criminal code of Gaza, you're not allowed to have any homosexual conduct, but there's no similar prohibition in the West Bank. However, in reality, the gay people are all in the closet in the West Bank. They are, if the only honor killings of men that ever happen in the West Bank are when people come out as gay. Those are just the criminal laws. Personal status laws, and again, these are just feminist issues. I'm not making this up, but generally, it's considered bad to be able to allow women to get married under the age of 18. They're considered children, but it's minimum legal age is 15 years for girls in the West Bank, even lower than under Hamas, where it's 17 years in the Gaza Strip. So you have 15-year-old girls. However, the age can be lower if a judge allows it and with the guardian's approval, which means that, again, a father who wants to make money by essentially selling his daughter off as for slavery is he can do it as long as the judge agrees with him. So he can sell his 11-year-old daughter to be married. Male guardianship over women. In order to marry, women have to have the consent of a male guardian. And it says there are weak legal protections for women under guardianship. Women can seek permission from the court to marry without, but again, it still exists. This entire guardianship concept still exists. Marriage and divorce. A wife owes obedience to the husband. A husband can divorce just by saying the words "you're divorced," but a wife has to jump through a whole bunch of hoops in order to be able to get divorced under Palestinian law. Polygamy, permitted. A man can have lots of wives. Of course, a woman cannot have lots of husbands, but a man can have lots of wives, which often it ends up being extraordinarily bad for at least a couple of the wives, because they're, very often one of them is going to be just the one that makes babies while the other one is for fun. And there are other really horrible stories that are out there. Does the West ever cover this? Do you ever see an article in Esquire about this sort of thing? No, of course not. Nobody talks about this stuff. Guardianship of children. Look at this. Fathers are the sole guardians of children. Again, this is the UN. I'm not making this stuff up. The UN says this. The UN came out with a report in 2018, and nobody covered this. So you get a divorce, the father has it. That's it. He's the one that has the custody. The women, out of luck. Over here, custody of children. After divorce, the woman has custody up to a certain age. Okay, so not completely out of luck, but automatically loses it if she remarries. This is insanity. Inheritance. Sharia rules is what applies to Muslims. So women have a right to inheritance, but it's going to be less. Daughters receive half the share that sons receive. This is the law. Okay? We're not talking tribal customs over here. We're talking Palestinian law. And this is the way things are going over there. Labor laws are similar. There's, paid maternity leave. After all the other stuff we heard about, that's hardly a big deal. And it's a little bit less than what they say. There are some jobs that women aren't allowed to go to have, and the labor law doesn't apply to domestic workers, which again is a feminist issue. When you look at all these together, it's astonishing that nobody really knows all of these things. You have to really study it. You have to really, I didn't know most of this stuff, and I follow this very carefully. It's crazy, and what's even crazier is that feminists are not saying a word about this. To them, this is, they're pro-Palestine. Therefore, is it because they're pro-Palestinian that they don't want to talk about it? So because it's going to embarrass themselves? Or are they just, are they really not feminist and they hate Jews more, hate Zionists more than they hate Palestine? I don't know what the reason is. But the hypocrisy is insane. And these are the laws. But again, and it goes beyond the laws. I'm not just only talking about laws. I'm talking about the reality. If this sort of stuff happens, there was a UN report that mentions, of course Palestinian men beat their wives. Yeah, it happens pretty often. But what's the reason? Oh, we have to blame Israel for it. In other words, there's no personal responsibility for the Palestinian men to actually not beat their wives because, they live under occupation, so therefore you got to sort of cut them some slack, which is very infantilizing for Palestinian men to begin with. But again, it's like this is a nutty thing that happens. And it gets even worse. Here is Mahmoud Abbas's advisor, his religious affairs advisor, on TV saying, hey, a man is permitted to beat his wife when she is disobedient. We can listen to a little of this. Hopefully you can hear it.
الله تبارك وتعالى تحدث في هذه الآية الكريمة عن حالة واحدة من حالات سلوك المرأة واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن. بمعنى إنه القرآن الكريم والله عز وجل شرع هذا التدرج في مواجهة سلوك خاطئ من المرأة. إنه والرجل المقصود به هنا ليس.
He goes on like this for over 3 minutes. But this is on TV. Nobody says a word about this, except, okay, maybe Times of Israel is going to have a blog post about it or something. But there's no feminist that says a word about this. And this is officially what an advisor to the president of the Palestinian Authority is saying. And this is, again, the silence of the feminists is not just hypocritical, but it's completely immoral. They are not standing up for their supposed standards. Why is that? There's only one. I mean, there are a few. Obviously, there are a number of Jews that are out there. But I'm friends with Phyllis Chesler, who was one of the early feminists from the '60s. She was up there along with Gloria Steinem, all of these feminists. She knows all of them. She's written books. She's the only person I know that actually stands up for Palestinian as well as other Arab women and against honor killings and that sort of thing of the original feminists. All the rest of them treat her like persona non grata, because she dared to actually take Israel's side and be a Zionist, and instead of taking the Palestinian side, which all the other feminists do. But who's the hypocrite? The hypocrite is all the other feminists. Phyllis Chesler is one of the only people from the original '60s feminists who is one of the only people that's consistent in the position of actually supporting feminism. But there's another implication that comes out from here that I've noticed a couple of months ago. I started reporting on, and it was also astonishing, and the implications go even beyond how awfully women are treated and are allowed to be treated under Palestinian law. There was a government institution under the Palestinian law, the Supreme Fatwa Council, which is, again, it's not only a religious institution, it is part of the Palestinian government. They announced, and this was back in December, I believe, they announced that they do not accept the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I imagine it's pronounced CEDAW. They said they can't accept any provisions that are inconsistent with Sharia law. Now, here's the funny thing. The Palestinian Authority is a signatory of this convention. They are, and they signed it without any reservations. You're allowed to sign with reservations. If there's something that contradicts, your own moral code or something like that, you're allowed to say, hey, we generally accept it, but. And that happens all the time with different conventions that are signed. They did it without any reservation. No problem whatsoever. And here, their own government is saying, we can't possibly accept it. This is about 5 years after they signed it. So that seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? And nobody really calls them on it. But then, and this has all happened because there was a number of there were people that were protesting against the idea of equal rights. A couple of tribes. So it ended up becoming in the news last December. But then it got even more interesting because I read an article in which the CEDAW was not the only convention that the PLO signed. They signed a whole bunch of them back around I don't know, 2012, 2013, something like that. And they had threatened Israel that they were going to, and Israel was saying, hey, you're not really a state, you're not allowed to do it. But when the peace negotiations stalled, this was one of the things they said that we're going to do. We're going to show that we're really that we're an official nation, we're as good as anybody else, and here's how we're going to prove it. we're going to sign all of these conventions. And some of them are absurd because they do it themselves all the time, against torture and stuff like that. But here's the one, again, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women is one of the things that they signed. So then I saw the editor-in-chief of a major Palestinian newspaper, his name's Dr. Nasser Allaham. He said that in a television show, he said, you know why they signed all of these things? It's not because they care about women's rights. It has nothing to do with it. He said because we cannot implement it because of our societal system, but the signing of the agreement to begin with was political and was not intended to undermine Sharia law, Islamic law. Had it not been for the signing of CEDAW and many other agreements, the International Criminal Court would not have accepted us. The Palestinians wanted to be accepted as a state under the definition of what a state is under the International Criminal Court, which is something that's still being discussed and that people are still trying to decide if they're considered a state. But some of the trappings of a state are to accede to international conventions. So they acceded to all these conventions in order to become part of the ICC, not because they believe in these conventions, not because they had any intention of actually adhering to these conventions. They acceded to the conventions because they're saying this is what has to be done for us to be considered a state. A complete sham when they did that. So sometimes you'll have feminists that say, well, Palestine signed this. That shows that they really care. No, it shows that they're cynical. They had no interest in doing it. And this became even more so when the prime minister himself, the prime minister, Mohammed Shtaya, when this thing came up, and again, this happened last December and January, he said literally, the government adheres to Palestinian values and principles and does not violate Sharia. In other words, Sharia is more important than any international law. Our religious and national values are above everything else, and this is in keeping with the decision of the Constitutional Court's decision as a protection of our women's honor, the unity of our society, and the rule of law. What did the Constitutional Court rule? So I looked it up, and it said the international agreements prevail over local laws, but only provided that they are consistent with the Palestinian religious and cultural legacy. And that's it. In other words, Sharia is the top thing to worry about, and as the top thing to adhere to. And then any international agreements come second. But if they are contradictory to Islamic law wins. Meaning that whatever they sign is not worth the paper they're signing. It's not worth the ink from the pen that they're signing it from. It's completely worthless. That has some implications. If the Palestinians are saying here explicitly that their signing of this convention against discrimination of women is meaningless because Sharia law is more important to them, that means that if there's ever a peace agreement with Israel, which doesn't seem likely, but let's say it does, or any other agreement that they have with Israel, whether it's a ceasefire or anything like that, if it's considered against Sharia law, then it's meaningless. Whatever they sign is meaningless. Now, if they concede, let's say that they do have a peace agreement with Israel. Let's say it's along the 1967 borders, exactly what they're asking for, exactly what they claim they're asking for. That would be against Sharia law, because under Sharia law, Jews can't own that land, period. There's no way. It has to be Arab-owned. Any land under Sharia law that's once under Muslim rule has to remain under Muslim rule. You're not going to see too many people, except for like the Bin Ladens and ISIS, who try to apply that to Spain, for example. However, that really is what Islamic law is in, or at least you'll find plenty of maybe there are some clerics that'll say that doesn't really apply so much nowadays. But you're gonna have a hard time finding a cleric that says that Israel is allowed to exist and Jews are allowed to control any land in what they would consider the Arab and Muslim Middle East. So what we learned from this is not just how bad feminism really is in the Palestinian territories. What we learned from here is that from the fact that they say explicitly that their signed agreements, in order for all of these conventions, don't mean anything. It means that any signed agreements that they have with Israel is also meaningless. This is a lot of implications over here, and it's not something that people usually talk about. So hopefully, with this, the people will see it a little bit more. And these idiots and these hypocrites, these call themselves feminists for justice in Palestine, and that they say they support BDS, you know, even if everything they say about Israel is true, even if the worst thing they say, all the worst lies they say about Israel is true, there is no way they can say that Palestine is any better as far as feminism is concerned. There's no possible way. And so they're supporting a misogynist society. How can you be a feminist? Okay, so Linda Sarsour could say it's impossible to be a feminist and a Zionist. How possibly could you be a feminist and pro-Palestinian? That is really what the hypocrisy is. Unless anybody has any interesting questions, very quickly, I think that's all I had to say. But this is just, it's an unreal truth that's out there, and it's a truth that gets covered up by everybody. And I'm not saying it's a conspiracy theory, but I'm saying, you know, you're not going to find mainstream publications talking about this. You're not going to find, you know, scholarly papers often talking about this sort of thing. In fact, some of this stuff I haven't seen reported anywhere else. I've never seen anybody talk about how the Palestinians officially are disregarding the Convention on against, you know, for discrimination against women. Nobody's talking about that. It's crazy. And so, you know, am I a bigger feminist than Linda Sarsour? Apparently I am. Am I a bigger feminist than Gloria Steinem, who's also, you know, said that she's pro-Palestinian? I sort of think so. And I don't consider myself a feminist. But the hypocrisy from these people who call themselves feminists is astonishing. You could say the same thing about, you know, the, you know, queers for Palestine and stuff like that. It's even worse for that. But this is something that, you know, everybody's feminist. Everybody wants equal rights for women. Everybody in the West wants that. And yet nobody actually stands up for the rights of Palestinian women. And that is just completely unconscionable. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time. I'm Elder of Zion. I hope you enjoyed the show.